Afternoon, Carl. Actually, it's good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm dialing in from Austin, Texas.
Oh, nice. I saw you had a lunch meetup, right?
Yeah, yeah. Shortly, I'll be walking down to a steakhouse to eat steak with some Thorchain.
Nice. Yeah, you got to keep up your steak, no alcohol diet, right?
Yeah, man, 100%. Alcohol is a depressant and a poison. You got to get rid of that stuff.
Yeah, 100%. Well, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. I'm excited to talk to you about Thorchain and all this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Whereabouts are you dialing in from?
Chicago.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, Windy City. I love Austin, though. I was there about a year ago, last time I was there, and it was amazing. Best food ever.
Food is good. Steak here is good.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
went to
absolutely.
just coincidentally, I went to a Jordan Peterson talk last night at the
Oh,
Moody Center.
nice. How's that?
Yeah, it's good. 90 minutes of a diatribe of incredibly well articulated points, but some of his points are quite hard to grasp. I think the audience was about 20,000, 30,000 people.
Wow.
I think a lot of people would have struggled to understand what he was trying to say. You have to
Yeah, he
really
can be a
listen.
bit high level sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. I think I would have preferred a more simple delivery of his points. I got his points, and I think everyone was trying to pick up, but I think only 10 to 20% would have understand what he was trying to say. Anyway, so it's actually a point for me too. You got to keep when you're trying to deliver something to maximize uptake. You've got to keep it simple.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a blog post by Scott Adams that is called "The Day You Learned How to Write," or "The Day You Became a Better Writer," something like that. Um, and it essentially just talks about being straight to the point and not fluffing it, and kind of like three key things that you can do to do that. And I've always kind of tried to use that in my writing and speaking to get straight to the point. Not circle around it, which is what a lot of people tend to do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can use complex, rich language to try and get points or try and prove your intelligence or your knowledge of words in the English language, or you can just focus on delivering a point in the simplest possible language. You really have to minimize cognitive burden if you wish to spread a message or spread a feature, as we're learning in Thorchain as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah. Well, and oftentimes you find that the people who use that big language are the ones that are kind of more armchair professors and don't actually have much of substance to say.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Very good.
Um,
All
Sweet.
right.
So it
Who
looks
have we
like
got
we're
on this?
getting people are filling up here.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me a bit of background of Chain Chatter.
Yeah, well, Chain Chatter is something we do to just invite people on and talk about different blockchains. And um, I my background is that I run Inleo. It's a Web3 social platform. So we try to bring people on who are knowledgeable about other blockchains and other ecosystems, and just kind of expand that knowledge to our community and other communities.
Cool, man. All right. Well, let's get straight into it. Looks like we got a bunch of listeners. You can
Yeah.
feel free to rapid fire me your questions and let's just see where it goes.
Sounds good. Let's do it. So, I wanted to start a little bit with your background because the first exposure I had to you was on the Mondays with Maya. Um, and, in it, you kind of doxed yourself and talked about how you were, the intern, the infamous intern behind the Thorchain account, which I've obviously been following for many years now. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and kind of how you got into Thorchain and how it's led to your kind of public persona now?
Yeah, cool. So I studied aeronautical engineering and I joined the Air Force as a pilot. Wanted to work my way up to the top level. So that was fighter pilot. So flew, worked that for 4 years, got to F-18 Hornet, to the squadron, did that for a little bit in fighters. Got moved to bombers because I was a bit too crazy for fighters. I liked pushing the limit of what the machine could do. So I did a 3 year tour on the bomber, big 4 engine bomber that flying around the world in and out of different operation zones. Ultimately got bored of that. And about 2013, Before that, I got into finance, just trading bots on currency markets, just trying to understand how the finance system worked. And then I discovered Bitcoin in 2013 at a meetup. It's about $100 at the time. Straight away, I read the white paper and bought as much as I could with my cash. And it went on this crazy pump up to $1,200. And then MT got hacked, and then 2014 was a big dump. And I was still wrapping my head around what this thing was. I was trying to convince everyone to buy it around me. But as I was plummeting back down to $200, it was a test of my resilience. In 2015, it started recovering, and then that's when I realized this thing was something serious. And I revisited my thesis, and it was all still there. I regarded Bitcoin as the best wealth preserving technology that can essentially, your value is your limited time and effort, which you convert into a vehicle to buy someone else's value, their time and effort. So you look for a vehicle that can store it across space and time. So if you convert your time and effort in Australia into cash, and then you come over to Austin, Texas, you can buy a stake out of a steakhouse. So you're buying someone else's time and effort across space. Gold is really good at doing that across time. You can store your value 10 years ago and buy someone else's value today. But there's no asset that does it in both domains, time and space, unless it's Bitcoin. Bitcoin's really good because of its scarcity properties at storing value across time as well as space because of its global availability. So I had that realization back in 2015, and I decided to go full time. Ethereum had just come out, and I was quite interested in the programmability of Ethereum. So I went to a hackathon in Melbourne, won it, got $1,000 in ETH. I think it was about $10 ETH at the time, and that's when I realized I was good at it. So I decided to get in and start building. Did about a year of building various projects, and I realized, trying to peel back the layer of the onion, that the biggest problem to solve was decentralized liquidity. That was at the time it was all about atomic swaps, and I looked at the atomic swap flow, and there's about 8 different user steps to do an atomic swap, and I thought to myself, there is no way this is going to work and get mass adoption. I participated in the Bancor ICO back in 2017, and I was very interested to see how the product. So in January 2018, when they launched the product, I was extremely disappointed because they completely missed the mark in the user experience. So January 2018, I decided to solve that particular problem. And yeah, wrote a white paper, hired a team, raised an initial round investment, and it was always going to be liquidity pool based cross-chain swaps. The initial tech stack we used was Cosmos, Beta Software, and Multisig, but we failed to deliver that by 6 months later. And at the end of the year, Ethereum was about to implode. I think it was about $80 at the time. There's a giant CDP on MakerDAO that was like literally $2 away from being liquidated, and that would have been it was crazy. Anyway, a lot of my investors were panicking, so I refunded half of them and kind of hit pause on the project till 2019. And then in May 2019, I discovered GG18, which is the threshold signature scheme. And poking around, I realized Binance had implemented it in Golang. So I thought to myself, hang on a minute, we can revisit this concept again, shed multi-sig and just go full on into threshold signatures. So I went to Germany, where I met Chad, and we won a hackathon by building the first version of Thorchain again using TSS and Cosmos right there and then at the Berlin hackathon over the course of the weekend. And Sunday night, I was like, Chad, let's build it. Quickly that week, raised 1.5 million investment from a round of investors on Binance, and away we went. 12 months later, we had a testnet, and 12 months after that, we had a KSnet, which we launched in single chain. I think 12 months after that, we launched multi-chain. So that's a quick little history of the project.
Nice. Yeah. And what was the, initial reaction when you guys kind of launched my first hit with you guys was, when it was already multi-chain chaosnet, but what was kind of the initial reaction as you rolled out from that it sounds like it was about 3 different phases.
Yeah, so there was a lot of difficult problems to solve. The Binance chain was the easiest chain to implement because, UTXO chains are just incredibly complex in dealing with UTXOs. Ethereum is also difficult with the ERC20s and gas and blah, blah, blah. So because we had launched on Binance chain, we were embedded in their community. We were receiving some of the developer support. We were using the Binance TSS Go library, so we had a lot of a relationship with Binance. They ultimately listed the asset 1 year later. So we knew we had to roll out a single chain environment where we're just doing BEP swaps, BEP 20 swaps or BEP 2, sorry. But that was always going to get retired so that we could learn how the system was going to work, and it did work. And that was when we decided to retire the single chain because it had proven to us that it could work, and relaunch it multi-chain with all the learnings of the previous 9 months baked into handling UTXOs, Ethereum assets, ERC20s, some UTXO forks and whatnot. So that's a single chain case that was just a phase in the journey where we could get out in production and test. We knew that there was no way we could solve all the problems by just sticking around with testnets. We had to go in the wild. We had to have everything thrown at us to figure out what could get thrown at us. We just had to solve the issues by being out in the arena. So that's what we did. And we branded it ChaosNet, and literally it was expect chaos. We don't know what could happen. Don't put all your money in. Just have a play and see what we could do. And the yields were high to pay for the risk that we're asking the community to take on with us. Anyway, multi-chain ChaosNet, same. I think 3 months after we launched multi-chain ChaosNet, we had the 3 big hacks. So that was we didn't fully understand all the permutations around the Ethereum Bifrost in terms of the upstream, downstream interactions of attack contracts on the router. The router is there purely just to handle ERC20 assets. We didn't actually need it. If you don't have ERC20 assets, you don't need a router. But we built the router to handle it. So if we just had ETH vaults, we wouldn't have been hacked in that nature. So it's just one part of the system. Anyway, we quickly learned that lesson. We fixed up all the issues and we implemented multiple layers of security, from like node pauses to outbound throttles to various other things to a contract whitelist and blah 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 to really lock down the system. It was a necessary part of the evolution of the protocol. We had to go through it. The protocol is much safer today because of it. And the other protocols that are building, they should be implementing all of those safety levers that are in place because we've learnt them in blood. Rules and levers are learnt in blood, and you only want to learn those mistakes once. So yeah, that's the evolution of the protocol. But today it's mainnet, and it's definitely mainnet. It's stable, mostly. There are some edge cases that crop up every now and then, like the last 3 months have been pretty embarrassingly unstable, but we just deal with that and move on. So that's right at the moment. Our massive focus right now is getting stability. We got some big integrations coming this year, and all they care about is the protocol stable, and that's why that's the focus is.
Yeah, and kind of continuing on with the points about security, I know that Nine Realms got involved, and then things really kind of took a turn towards Thorsec and just making things ultimately a lot more reliable. What is and I know that this is a big question for people. It's kind of like the trolls on Twitter love to continually bring up the days from multi-chain ChaosNet, but what does the security look like today of Thorchain and stability wise? And then, what do you see as kind of, some key elements moving forward as those integrations and upgrades happen?
Yeah. So firstly, all marketing is good marketing. Get your name out there. There's a lot of people that love to hate Thorchain and a lot of people that hate to love Thorchain. That's good. I mean, even the brand, the name itself is bipolar and creates this kind of myopic reaction. That's also good. It's the whole point on a segue. The whole point of that brand was to tap into this giant memetic repository of knowledge. Nobody owns the Thor brand. It's been around since the Book of Genesis. It's got this rich history. Anyone can tap into it. It's got this giant repository of memes that we can just deploy at a moment's notice. So that was the idea, is to create this kind of meme coin, but with this really convincing deep tech stack to trying to make it approachable and familiar. So that's the brand. It is myopic and it creates this kind of bipolar reaction with people. Whatever, it's good marketing. Second thing is with the the craziness and the chaos. That's also good marketing because it bakes into people's psyche that the protocol and its community are in the arena. They're having a crack. They're trying to solve problems, and they're not trying to build this kind of fantasy protocol on a white paper and promise the world and never deliver. On the security front, in my regard, there's 3 levels of security: economic security, operational security, and procedural security. So economic security is the notion that every single dollar in the protocol is protected by at least $1 in bond. And that's been a hardcore belief of the protocol since day one. It has what we call hard coupled security. That is, the TVL reflexively manages itself based on the bond through an incentive pendulum. Other protocols, we regard them as having optimistic security, that they hope that the bond will exceed the TVL at all times through like a discounted cash flow model. One such example would be Chainflow. Finally, there's protocols that don't have any security whatsoever, and they rely on like this kind of reputation or like tight control of the valid asset. Well, good luck to them, because it's basically just a Thanksgiving turkey. For 1,000 days, it thinks its life is awesome. Suddenly, it wakes up dead. So that's nothing that Thorchain will ever face, because it has hard coupled security. So that's important. Second thing is operational security. Operational security in regards to having all the security levers in place, things like node pools, operate outbound throttles, and the signing queue, so that the protocol can defend attacks as they come in. It's got this idea that we can't design and specify every single attack path. Instead, we should have these kind of layers, like an onion, where we can defend and detect attacks quickly and control it. So that's why things like node pause, monitoring, getting the community to call out anything, that's all part of this operational security envelope. Lastly is like procedural security. So, the way we create new PRs, the way we check them up with Thorsec, the way they go out to the nodes, we deploy it to stakelet first, where we to make sure the whole machine is not going to get a consensus halt. Run it on StageNet for a week, test it, then deploy it to mainnet via the node process. So there's 3 levels of security there. We're massively focused on security. Like, if Thorchain has a 0 day and we wake up with all the funds stolen out of TSS, like, it's very difficult to recover from that. It is possible to recover from that, but it's not something we ever want to focus on. Thorchain today is the biggest NPC protocol in the world with the largest amount of funds in public. Not only is the state machine and all code paths completely open source and inspectable, but also all the funds are there for the taking if you have access to any 0 days. That's why it's important to have a bounty program, so that if you are sitting on a 0 day, you might as well just tell the DORSEC and get paid, rather than try and spin up a node and risk it all. So that's why there's a bounty program. And the protocol and the treasury has paid out 3 or 4 bounties. We've probably paid out the most bounties of any company in the world when it comes to threshold signatures, and everybody knows that now. And the treasury pays out. So that's my quick spiel on security.
Yeah, no, and I've seen that work. Some of the ideas you were talking about with the node pausing and bounties. I've seen that happen over the past few months, and I think there was even a pause in the last 2 weeks where something was found and fixed right away, and nothing was lost. So definitely seems like the security has worked, and the protocols in place are working. So shifting gears a little bit towards Rune Pool and some of the ideas that are being discussed and thrown around. I mean, I remember the early days, when it was Bet2 and we were able to single side stake, our Rune into a vault and essentially just earn yield, but obviously it had nothing to do with pools. The idea is, as I understand it from Rune Pool, is that you'll single side LP your Rune alongside the protocol and liquidity and savers. Can you explain the concepts, kind of in a way that maybe someone who has no experience with Thorchain or, savers or protocol and liquidity might understand?
Sure. So TVL is extremely important. Thorchain needs to be able to attract external capital, exogenous capital like Bitcoin, ETH, and stablecoins, in order to monetize that. Charge a premium for services. Those services are swaps. Actually, those services are just swaps. Everything else is built around swaps. And the liquidity fees the protocol gains is what pays into the nodes and LPs. So Thorchain does not make money if it has $0 in external capital. It needs to attract as much capital as possible and scale that up. Right now, the system is underperforming on the TVL front. It's got excellent security and it's got excellent volume and liquidity. So the team kind of like rotate around between focusing on security, TVL, or liquidity. Right now, once we cross the stability chasm, then the big focus will be on TVL. Get as much in as possible. So the L1 Saver user experience is amazing. You never have anyone ever complaining about the L1 Saver experience, with the exception of in the early days when we were still tweaking out the streaming savers. L1 Savers is amazing. You can just literally rock up with your 10 Bitcoin, deposit it in via Bitcoin transaction, and 6 months later, you can see the yield slowly accumulating. That is the UX that we're trying to achieve here. However, we need someone else to provide the RUNE side. To date, that has been POL or dual LP. POL is actually just a giant dual LP, but it programmatically deploys RUNE on the other side, depending on the demand of its users. So if everyone's piling into the Bitcoin savings vault, POL will also pile into the Bitcoin savings vault to match. And it's the idea that if for every dollar of L1 capital that brings to the network, we need a dollar of RUNE capital onto the other side. So rather than POL running out, there's the reserves. The POL deploys from the reserve. There's about 8 million RUNE in the reserve and about 4 million RUNE in POL. We want to go back to the simplicity of the RUNE Vault version 1 from 4 years ago and allow you to just simply stake your RUNE, not stake, but pull your RUNE via a single transaction. What will actually happen is that RUNE will go into a module, it will eject the reserve POL out, and you're basically one for one placing the reserve and kicking that RUNE back into the reserve. So now the 4 million POL position is owned by users and no longer by the reserve. Now it won't just be 4 million RUNE. I see probably 50 million RUNE piling into this giant RUNE pool because the user experience will be so easy, so simple, and the value proposition is so easy to grok. This giant RUNE pool will then deploy to match saver demand. So as Bitcoin, stablecoin, ETH piles in to access the L1 savers features, the RUNE in the RUNE pool will deploy to match dollar for dollar. So if you put in 1 Bitcoin of savers, 1 Bitcoin worth of RUNE will get streamed into the pool on the other side to match. So that's how the protocol can now scale liquidity up to where it maxes it out. Now, as a user, what do you get? So rather than jumping in as in a dual LP position and choosing to wrap your head around all the price curves of what if I add my RUNE to the Bitcoin pool and now I got to track the RUNE Bitcoin price, or what if I add my RUNE to the USDT pool, then I got to monitor like RUNE price reflexivity against USD. And are we in a local top or a local bottom or a micro top or a micro bottom? Where are we in the market? So there's a lot of decision making going on right there as you come to this complex protocol and it's got 30 different pools to add your RUNE to. Which one did you add it to? Are you long RUNE, short USDT? Are you long Bitcoin, short RUNE? It's just a complex cognitive burden. So we're going to fix all that by just saying, now just throw your RUNE in this giant module and let the protocol manage it for you. And what that means is actually just RUNE versus the world. The aggregate IL across all pools will by definition be less than any isolated peak IL in any peak pool. So because of that, you are actually just accessing the liquidity APY minus the general reflexivity of RUNE. Now at 50% synth utilization, we know that the price curve is relatively flat between plus or minus 50% on a change of RUNE versus the other asset. So what that means is, let's just say RUNE is $5, or $4. If RUNE goes to $6, there's actually almost no IL. And if RUNE goes from $4 minus 50% down to $2, again, there's actually quite a flat curve there. There's no IL due to the synth leverage of at the 50% level. So that means within a plus or minus 50% of RUNE versus the L1, the price curve is flat and there's not much IL going on, which is far different to choosing a single L1 pool and depositing RUNE there. So as a result, the aggregate IL will be less than peak IL in a single pool. Therefore, you will be accessing the global liquidity APY, which is currently at about 18%. And you won't need to make a massive decision around which pool you're going into. You're just taking a bet that RUNE is going to sit plus or minus 50% on aggregate L1. It's so simple. And this module doesn't need to be 4 million RUNE. It can be 50 million RUNE. And what that means is the risk of being basically underwriting savers just goes down. It just continues to go down as this RUNE pool fills up. So it's basically it de-risks the protocol because it kicks out the reserve and now it doesn't need the reserve to underwrite savers. It brings in RUNE. As long as the RUNE poolers are long-term oriented, that is that they are willing to be around for 6-12 months to see the yield from liquidity fees slowly grind away any IL experiences that is higher than plus minus 50%, then everyone should have a good time. And it de-risks the protocol, de-risks the users, removes the cognitive burden, and basically we can suck in 50 million RUNE out of Binance, out of the exchanges, out of all these idle wallets, put it in the protocol where it can be put to put to the use. So there you go. Hopefully that answered most of the questions.
Yeah, no, I mean that was very comprehensive. You hit upon every question that was coming up in my mind. You hit upon in your points. But if you had to steel man the other side, so what would be, I mean, it sounds like if I'm trying to steel man it a little bit as well in asking some questions, it sounds almost too good to be true. Like, okay, you're gonna get access to this aggregated and permanent loss. You're essentially kind of buying into an index, per se, and then the protocol itself can scale and de-risk. I mean, that just sounds like amazing, amazing, amazing. But if you had to steel man the other side of it, what could be some potential downsides or risks to the protocol? Let's say that if it scales up to 50 million, what would be some of those risks?
Roger. So the first issue is we remove room price reflexivity, which is a good and bad thing. The good thing is we don't explore the parts of the room price envelope which could have an impact on things like lending and various other things. So that's good. Like we literally just sit in the middle of the envelope and we don't try and push at the end, because when we start being hanging out at the end of the envelope, people can get myopic and like panic, right? And we don't need to see that. So that's why it's good. The bad reason is we lose the price reflexivity. So if we onboard 50 million in L1 savers, that causes a 25 million buy pressure on Rune, which opens up more caps. In this regard, we're literally just one-for-one matching. So if we bring in 10 million savers, we add 10 million in Rune on the other side. There's no price reflexivity. We literally just scale liquidity by 20 million. There's no change in Rune price. So then we lose the kind of, what you can say is like the Rune price action as we onboard this L1 capital. Now, that is a good and bad thing, because I'd much rather Rune to be sitting at $5, $6 as it fills up its pools all the way to hit the pool APY. And let me explain why. If we can get the Rune pool all the way up to the pushing the incentive pendulum back to the node. So right now the incentive pendulum massively favors liquidity because it doesn't have enough liquidity. So by adding Rune pool, we can potentially scale the liquidity side up to push the incentive pendulum back to the nodes. So now the nodes are earning 18% and the liquidity is earning the 5%. That may cause a drop off in liquidity provision. Rune poolers may be leaving too quickly because they're like, okay, I put my Rune in, but I'm not earning enough liquidity fees because all has been paid to the nodes. And they may leave before they have enough time to make enough gain from aggregate IL. So they may experience a small loss in principal if they go in and leave 2 months later without waiting for the gains to be accrued. Now, but continuing it further, if the incentive pendulum is paying the nodes, now the nodes are earning 10, 15% APYs, we can now kickstart bond wars again. There's actually now a really good reason to buying up Rune, bonding it to a node, and putting it into the network. So that's where the price action could be coming from. It's just one step further. Does it make sense? So rather than getting price action immediately when we onboard that TVL, we've kind of got to wait for the incentive pendulum to push it onto the nodes for the node to start buying Rune again. And at that point, we'll probably roll out features such as like an auto bond module where you can more easily deploy into the node side. So we're just constantly targeting which feature is underperforming. Now back to the other point of what is the other downside of the protocol. If we roll out a giant Rune pool, it's mainly a user experience and a messaging problem. We have to tell users very explicitly, this is not a Rune staking module. You could lose your principal. This is not a guaranteed return here, because if Rune is still reflexive and it's outside the plus or minus 50%, and you're not patient enough, you could walk away with less Rune that you put in. So there's a user experience problem there. There's a messaging problem. But initially, we will target like the chaddest of the chads who are willing to jump in at 18% APY, take a bit of risk. Rune could perform over the next 12 to 18 months massively outside of its the 50% curve. So there's some risk there. But it's all solvable. All of this is solvable, and I think this is the final step to really boosting Thorchain up to where it should be.
Yeah, well, and I know, you kind of addressed it, but one of the key problems for me, as someone who's held Rune for a long time and, is very bullish on the protocol and, getting to $100 billion market cap, putting it into a dual LP and risking, losing out on the big gains of Rune is a big reason why, someone like me would not put all of my Rune in a liquidity pool. But obviously, aggregating all that impermanent loss kind of shoves off some of that risk, um, and basically just allows me to be exposed to the entire basket, uh, instead of just one or two assets. But kind of on that point of getting to $100 billion, which I know you've stated as kind of your goal for Thorchain. Right now Thorchain is doing about $10 billion per month in trading volume, which by the way is absolutely insane, to see that accelerated growth the past year. Do you see that as kind of a linear function where to get to, because right now it's about, I think Rune's about $2 billion market cap. So to get to, 100 billion, do you see that as kind of like a linear function? Like we need to go from $10 billion a month to, 20x that in order to get the resulting market cap? Or do you see, other factors kind of pushing Thorchain, to those heights?
And security at every single phase of growth. If we can do that, then the protocol is performing as to its peak. It's like peak performance, and so then integrating partners will experience the best price execution and the best feature set. Like the streaming swaps, you can do potentially $100 million streaming swaps with on $1 billion of TVL. That's certainly what's possible, and we will see those. Like there's a non-zero chance that as the world and the total accumulated value that's crypto absorbs, it's not going to be long before we start seeing people do 10, 20, 50, $100 million of streaming swaps, potentially one day $1 billion streaming swaps. So the whole system can just keep scaling. Now, to get beyond to 10, 20 billion, it needs to be a sex killer. It absolutely has to be feature parity uh, to Binance and Kraken Coinbase. It has to offer limit orders. It has to offer a perps platform. Perps is obviously the cheat code to 10xing your exchange. Every exchange, centralized exchange does this. So perps, then the question is, do we do a perps exchange on the protocol this cycle, or do we wait until the next bear cycle where we can have a bit more focus? I tell the team, and everyone agrees, bear markets are for building and bull markets are for not blowing up. And that's kind of what the focus is for the next 18 months is just don't blow up. Just get the TVL in the protocol, remove room price reflexivity, make it really stable, avoid having any issues with bugs and with 0 days, and just don't blow up. But long term, the market for a sex killer is 100 billion plus. Coinbase, Binance, Kraken, these exchanges sit on that level, and we know it's just a one way valve from regulated uh, regulated protocol or platforms into true free to be protocols. And Thorchain is a free to be protocol. Every dollar that goes in can sit there happily without many other issues with terms like jurisdictional oversight. That's what's here. So, to answer your question, how does Thorchain or a protocol in this ecosystem get to 100 billion? Achieve sex-like parity with all the feature set that's to be expected from a centralized exchange. Don't blow up, and just keep executing across the pillars of security, volume, and liquidity. The protocol, in my opinion, has already won. It already has the major integration partners already in the pipeline, and at that point, it really is just Thorchain just has to stay competitive on the swap execution around the 100 to million to 10 million level. No protocol could beat Thorchain above a million right now, and that's just with increasing TVL. That is the way that Thorchain can stay competitive always. So yeah, Thorchain has won, and it's now the Thorchain's its position to lose. Right? We just don't blow up, continue executing, continue building those integrations, and don't trip up, and then we can hit 100 billion. You know, maybe not this cycle, but certainly next cycle.
Yeah, and I saw a tweet that you put out where you talked about, the future of Thorchain being, corner the market, and as you do that, and once you've done that, scale up the fees and, increase the efficiency of earning, which I obviously have seen. And a lot of different companies and markets, that is generally a good strategy to, gain your edge, gain your advantage, and then press your advantage and collect those fees. So what do you see happening, in terms of Thorchain fees over the long run? I've seen a couple of people talk about, fees on affiliate UIs and fees on the protocol itself. What's your general position on fees and making swaps more efficient, which I think is ultimately the way to beat out, centralized exchanges? Is like, I've seen other tweets talk about that, if you can make a swap more efficient, more decentralized, better priced, and faster, it's just becomes a no-brainer to use it over a centralized exchange. How do you see the kind of fee environment evolving in the next, say, 6, 12, 18 months?
Yeah, Thorchain is definitely underselling its services. It doesn't subsidize anything right now. So when you do a swap with Thorchain, you pay for the gas at every level, and Thorchain is not subsidizing that. Other protocols may try and subsidize gas and cheat there, but it's just not going to be sustainable long term. And who's paying for that are the token holders of those protocols. So Thorchain doesn't subsidize it. It actually tries to accumulate a small amount of value over time. And you can check this out yourself with the accumulation of the reserve from outbound fees. Long term, and I've said this, the protocol needs to stay competitive this cycle, and then win the integrations, and then look to call those integrations in. An easy way to do this, and I think there's already a proposal made, is just to match affiliate fees charged. So if Trust Wallet can convince a user to pay 70 bips to do a swap, then there's no reason why Trust Wallet are doing that convincing on behalf of the protocol. So the protocol should just be able to match on some sliding scale. So instead of doing 5 bips min basis fee, it can say do a 50% match to Trust Wallet. So in fact, the Trust Wallet user is convincing, or Trust Wallet is convincing the user to pay the 70 bips affiliate fee plus some factor of that, say like 50%. So an additional 35 bips that the protocol can charge instead of 5 bips. So that's, in my opinion, an easy win there. If the users don't like it, it's actually not Thorchain's fault. They can switch interfaces and say jump on Asgardex, which charges 10 bips, in which case the protocol would be earning 5 bips. Another thing is the theoretical affiliate liquidity fee is actually 0. If you do a small enough swap on a cheap enough chain, you're actually paying 0 bips. Now, the reason why that is so that the pricing function of the protocol can approach perfectness, as in if you always charge 100 bips, then the prices of, say, stablecoins and Thorchain would always live plus or minus 1 cent. Does it make sense? Because you can't arbitrage below a cent because that's your margin. So the protocol instead lets you arb down to 0. In practice, this is probably like a bit of an academic point. Potentially, Thorchain should establish a min bips on every swap down to say 5 or 10 bips. I think that's fine. We don't yet see pricing execution necessary below 5 bips, in my opinion. Probably until it gets really big and we're actually like chasing limit orders where people want to actually target fees to that level. So yeah, that's where the fees are sitting. But it's a good discussion. Right now, we don't need to do anything because the protocol and the community is still in land grab mode. But probably in 12 months, we should be asking ourselves a question: should we start raising fees?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, stepping back a little bit from Thorchain, I've seen that you've gotten recently involved with Thor Wallet, and kind of just expanding your horizons in terms of, it seems, kind of advising as well as building other projects, that are related and adjacent in the space. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you kind of see happening more on, say, the front end side of things?
Yeah, so front ends are really important. There's a really good spectrum of front ends. We've never built our own front ends. I mean, I wrote the original version of DEXs myself, but that was handed over to the Thor Swap team. Asgardex was built by an external developer, and now that was handed over to a different dev team as well, Stormzy. So the protocol never maintains its own interfaces. So it means there's not much liability around the core contributors because the core contributors don't run interfaces and interfaces deal with users. So that's why user interface diversity is critical. It presents users heaps of options, and there's heaps of backup to users to access these interfaces. And these interfaces can choose who to do business with. Some if they wish, can do add address listing and checking on that, and they're more than welcome to go ahead because they're the ones charging the fees, and they're the ones who need to choose who to do business with. Now, my own involvement is I recognise that Thor Wallet is a distressed asset. Over the last bear cycle, they've had their own issues, and I think the biggest issue that allows them the biggest win right now is just to refresh the user experience. But I'm pretty impressed with exactly what they've built. They've built essentially a on ramp, off ramp between legacy world, legacy finance, and DeFi. So that's why I'm super excited about that. You can think of Thor Wallet as like a crypto.com, a small crypto.com. So it's like a retail focus app with banking services. For now, those services are not available to US because of various jurisdictional problems over here. But for most of the world, it is available. So it's a good retail focused app I can get behind, and I think it's a distressed asset that just needs a bit of a spike to help. That's why I'm involved there. And I'm building Voltex. So the biggest thing I've noticed in the last 11 years I've been in crypto, and when I first got into crypto back in 2013, the Apple App Store even banned all the Bitcoin wallet apps. So you couldn't even download a Bitcoin wallet app in 2013. It was banned. And wallets is the gateway to being your own bank. It's one of the most important bits of the infrastructure. And in 2017, when I jumped in the Trust Wallet Telegram, and there's only like 15 people there, I met Victor, and helped him push it out. And yeah, there's a story there. Maybe I'll tell you one day as well. But Trust Wallet, in my opinion, just absolutely executed on the user experience front and try to solve a lot of the problem around the confusing levels of wallet infrastructure and building out Wallet Core, which is an incredible piece of kit. But still, with my interaction with Thorchain and building on TSS, I can have this kind of asymmetry where I recognize professional signatures are actually the answer to a lot of our problems here. I've seen friends and family lose money through phishing attacks or losing their keys, or I've just seen it too many times. And originally, I would recommend people to get hardware wallets or download your favorite mobile wallet. But at this point, the idea of having a single signature wallet, it just is completely daft. You don't log into your G Drive, your iCloud, with just a single device. Most people have and should have two-factor authentication because there's a non-zero chance your single key is going to get compromised. And once that key is compromised, there's no turning back. So there's no way you can sleep at night knowing that. That's the fact. Whereas two-factor allows you to split those keys, and the chances of losing access to both keys, as long as you keep them separate, now goes to almost zero. So it's basically Voltex is the protocol I'm building right now, the wallet app. It basically takes Thorchain's TSS, throws it into a retail app, and gives everyone a two-factor wallet. And it won't just be it that we're building in the way of building a WASM module, so you can have a Voltex co-signing module in say ThorSwap or Thor Wallet, or even straight in CoinGecko, because now web browsers can safely store the Vault shares. They can literally just create it in the browser right there. You can safely upload a Vault share. There's no funds on it. It's just a signing key. And so you can, in the future, hopefully in the next 3 to 6 months, you'll be able to go to your favorite website and do swaps right there in the browser safely with your phone, your Android or your iPhone, as your protected two-factor device. And the phone will have a very rich screen. You'll be able to see the gas rate, who you're sending to, the transaction object, rather than trying to click through a tiny little hardware device screen and like look at the size 8 font and try and read addresses. It's just on a giant user-friendly iPhone screen. So it's just a better user experience, and it's much safer, and it's much more appropriate. I think it's necessary to cross the chasm of getting 1 billion people plus safely into crypto.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm all about, making the user experience as easy as possible. That's been, kind of my focus since I got into space a while back, which was just, how do we make this easier for the average person to use and also safer. And I've had plenty of friends and family lose money to, poor wallet management and even, keeping crypto in places like BlockFi and FTX, just because the, user experience is easier when you're using something like that, but then obviously you give up a lot of the principles of crypto. Um, I saw today you released a thread talking about JP Thor, your branding around yourself, and a lot of the things you've said, while we've been on this call are very core to the principles you talked about in that thread. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and like, kind of this overall persona that you're putting out into the world and what you're aiming to do, to kind of accelerate a more abundant and bright future?
Yeah, sure. So I built Thorchain for 6 years under a pseudo identity called Lena. I really wanted to do it because I wanted to focus on just the builds and the technology and working with people who just build a protocol without generating a bunch of liability and founder complex and all that nonsense, because you just see it so many times over and over again. So what was absolutely necessary was that the protocol had to have achieved planned obsolescence. It had to have put the treasury in a decentralized or distributed fashion. It had to have handed over the core development processes. The original team had to have moved on, and all the original liability around the project, around the fundraise token, blah, 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 had to have been shed to protect the project. So that has been achieved internally and externally. And it's now okay and correct of me to essentially come out and unveil my personality. I put all my energy into the Thorchain project the last 6 years. And, when I wanted to tweet, it was through my own account, it was through the Thorchain account. And all that energy was coming out through that account and through my pseudo identity. But now what's next is a maturation, essentially achieving maturity around my own identity and pursuing into the next big thing. That next big thing is accelerationism. Accelerationism can explain so much. Like, if you think where the world is today, it's massively confused. People have lost their purpose and their vision. They don't actually know what they're trying to do with their lives. And if you think what's actually at stake here, it's actually humanity itself, where it's a question of biological compute versus silicon-based compute. And it literally comes down to the number of brains and how much they can do in terms of the bandwidth and latency, and how effective are they at. And if you look at the numbers right now, we've got 8 billion brains who are less effective today because of all the distraction and all the junk that people are throwing into their bodies. And they're doing less things because they're all distracted and they don't understand a vision of purpose. So what's going to happen is the bots are going to be controlled by a very narrow few, and most of the world is going to get zombified by just a very small group of people. And what that means is those people will essentially own the world. They'll be able to feed an infinite stream of content, which will zombify most of humanity. And what's at stake is humanity itself. It will get snuffed out because instead of having 8 billion people effectively trying to progress into the new frontier and spread intelligence to the universe, which we should do, the entire humanity will just snuff itself out because there won't be anything worth saving anymore. So that's what's at stake. It's a big 50, 100-year plus vision, but it has to happen. Elon is directionally correct. We do need to move intelligence to another host planet because the threat of an asteroid hitting us here on Earth and resetting us back down to mosquitoes and crocodiles is extremely high. And if you think about the progress of intelligence from the primordial protein soup to RNA, DNA, fauna, flora, the mammals, and to us, we represent that intelligence pathway. And we're very, very good at it. And we won that intelligence race because we can access mimetic pathways of information transfer. Just like me telling you this bit of information right now. This is a meme. Whereas the crocodile can only evolve and learn about its environment and pass information forward through its genetic pathways, which are actually fundamentally very slow. Whereas humans can evolve much faster. And we're going to generate this mimetic repository, upload it to the silicon-based machines, and charge them with the responsibility of projecting that intelligence through the universe. But we need to make sure that the bots are curious about the universe and want to explore. Because if you charge them in that way, then instead of them trying to be used to zombify the human race and extinguish it, they'll be exploring the universe, crossing into different stars and galaxies, and potentially even crossing the universal reset. But yeah, that's a big trillion-year pathway there. But it's really important that we have that vision. We kind of wake humanity up and say, hey, if we don't make these big changes over the next 5, 10 years, most of humanity is going to get zombified by very, very few, and that's what's at stake. So that's the accelerationist kind of manifesto. Elon Musk is directionally correct, but he's just not saying it correctly. Beth Bezos, being the founder of the EAC movement, I subscribe to, but again, he's not saying it correctly either. It's a marketing problem. We need to basically build a brand around the ASOL movement or the EAC movement and sell it and just explain what it is. Humanity's at stake. We need to start accelerating. It's simple as that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, tend to think that the future is automatically brighter, which is not always true. Civilizations, have a rise and fall to them, and I definitely subscribe to some of the stuff that Ray Dalio talks about when it comes to that. So definitely a big fan of those ideas and pushing them forward, because I think a lot of people are just sleepwalking through life and thinking that everything's going to be okay tomorrow, whether or not they do anything, and that's just simply not true. But I know you got to run in a few minutes for the meetup. Leave the audience with. I think you've got the meetup today, and then another one this coming Friday in New York, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So I've got one here in Texas with some Thorchains, and then into New York tonight. I'll catch up Chad and a few other of my friends, and then we hopefully we'll hang out with some Thorchains on Friday night at a bar. So if you're in New York, come along. There's some stuff on Twitter. I'll repost the event itself. But yeah, thanks everyone for listening, and be sure to ask me any questions. So zooming out a little bit, Thorchain's in a really good position. Nine Realms is the correct team to maintain it over the next 5 years. I'll be working very closely with them. They've got the correct incentives to do so. The protocol is in safe hands. The protocol already today is very capable and decentralized. There's no little weak links. We know where the last remaining ones are and what we need to do to fix that around like node meme and stuff like that. But this protocol achieved decentralization over the course of 6 years. It took a lot of people doing a lot of things correctly for it to happen. And it's really the Thorchain's community's option for the taking. We just keep executing, keep building, don't blow up, and just sell the message. And if we do so over the next 5 years, the protocol is going to be worth 100 billion plus. And if Thorchain missteps, then another one will achieve that. Chainflip, Maya, or Sarai. So it really is, it's ours for the taking. Just stay focused and stay building and keep the energy levels high. Quit alcohol and try a carnival.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. Love all the ideas you shared, and I know the audience appreciates it as well. So enjoy yourself, enjoy your steak.
Very good. And I'm happy to take one or two questions. We've still got 7 minutes.
Sure, yeah. Let's see what we got. Yeah, if you guys are listening, I see a bunch of you are already in the Threadcast dropping comments. So if you've got any questions, drop them in the Threadcast. I'm reading through them right now. Mr. Hive asks, what would be one's expected earnings if they provide liquidity on Rune? I'm assuming he means on Rune Vault, and you kind of talked about that, the aggregate being 18%. Is there a way for people to kind of look at that and predict what it could be going into the future?
Yeah, so assuming Rune stays plus or minus 50% against the aggregate L1 assets, then you should be targeting pretty close to the liquidity APY, which is actually quite easy to calculate. You can backtest this by looking at POL's growth and seeing how POL fluctuates in its principal, because as the aggregate IL bounces up and down, you can just see POL also bouncing up and down. But the trend is clear, and then if you sample a bit less, maybe like once a month, and then I'm about to walk into this meetup. And as you sample a bit less, you can see that we're looking at 10-15% APRs. So you can backtest that, and so I think that as people pile into the Rune pool, that APY is going to drop as the liquidity and the incentive pendulum shifts towards the nodes. So yeah, just keep an eye on it. Well, the community will release a whole bunch of tools and whatnot to allow users to easily measure this.
Next question, is Solana coming this year?
Yeah, so we commissioned a dev team to build out the Solana Bifrost. That's been mostly handed over. Solana's will be the next chain, absolutely. We believe in a multi-chain future. Solana's thesis is monolithic. Ethereum's thesis is modular. It's too early to say which one's going to win out. They both have the pros and cons. What will most likely happen is they'll both happily coexist, maybe at different value penetration levels. Who knows? I mean, right now, I think it's like Solana's 20% of Ethereum. So there's a bit of Pareto going on there, 80%, 20%, blah, blah, blah. But I think long term, Solana is the correct decision. It validates Thorchain's design, because Thorchain is a chain agnostic protocol that can do both at the same time in a decentralized way. So it's absolutely necessary, and it will be the next chain as soon as we're ready.
Sweet. And that was from Nifty. Next question from Lukeel. Now that the Bitcoin halving is come and gone, what do you think is next for the crypto space in general?
It's just an ongoing professionalization of the asset. I think Bitcoin's big next target is to demonetize gold. So that's a 14, $15 trillion asset. I don't think it'll happen this cycle. It'll definitely happen next cycle. So that that's your 700 grand $1 million Bitcoin by the end of the decade. The Beyond that, we'll see more and more sovereign adoption of Bitcoin. We'll see more countries just jump on that express train of freedom, buy as much as they can to monetize their debt. That's how Bitcoin gets to 50, 100 trillion. So that's the next 10x. And then finally, and ironically, Bitcoin is the only way for the US to monetize its giant debt pool, most likely 50 trillion by the end of the decade or more. There's only one asset in the world that can monetize that amount of debt. It's not gold, it's not the GDP and AI exports, or it could be. It's Bitcoin, and the US is accumulating a lot of Bitcoin right now through Coinbase and ETFs. And you could see an executive order 6102 moment appear where that Bitcoin gets force seized. So I wouldn't be holding Bitcoin under an ETF or Coinbase, that's for sure. I'll be holding it self-sovereign. But ironically, seizing that Bitcoin to monetize debt would just cause the valuation of Bitcoin. So that's when we see a multiple $100 trillion Bitcoin. Long term, all the value of monetary assets of the world is approaching a quadrillion at today's prices. So Bitcoin could easily hit the the $100 million mark. But then what does that look like? Well, everything in the world gets priced against Bitcoin. And then finally, Bitcoin is no longer volatile because everything is priced against sats. So that's probably the next 20 years.
Nice. And how do you see, let's say that Bitcoin flips gold, which I think most of us generally agree that it will. How do you see that impacting Thorchain?
So Thorchain is just going to grow with everything. As the markets grow 10x, then the protocol should grow 10x. So ironically, Thorchain will one day hit 100 billion just by being in the markets and not blowing up, with or without us. We can accelerate it by doing really good things, such as adding the right chains, adding the right features, and focusing on the build. But yeah, it will happen. I'm going to jump off now and walk over to this meetup.
Yeah.
But thanks so much. Happy to continue interacting with the community,
Awesome.
answering questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
No problems.
All right.
Thanks for scheduling
Yep.
it.
Enjoy your
All right.
lunch.
See you. Cheers. Bye.
See ya. Bye.